Welcome to Ministry Untold. Is this too honest for you? Let's talk about why pastors are burning out quietly. Hey, my name is Wren, and I want to welcome you to this space. This is a safe space. This is not a sermon, it's not a theological debate, it's not a Bible study. If you're looking for any of those things, then you're going to have to keep looking. But this space is a space where we talk about the practical truth regarding ministry, the parts where we don't really talk about in the pulpit. We're not here to fix anything. This is not what this is about. And we're not here to make recommendations, even. We are just here to bring an awareness that is associated or that is necessary for the things that ministers go through. Because here's the truth: awareness is the beginning of healing. Just a little bit about me, since this is episode 1 and we're going to be starting this journey. I've been pastoring for a couple of years now. I'm married to a very beautiful wife, and we have a very beautiful, when I say beautiful, I mean beautiful daughter. Her name is Naraya. And we pastor here in the United States. Specifically, we pastor in the state of Mississippi. And like every pastor, when I started out my journey trying to find who I am as a pastor. And so as the journey progressed and as the experiences roll on, I began to form my own story. I began to form my own narrative, have my own experiences. And so this podcast was birthed out of that story. As a matter of fact, it is also birthed out of this book that I just wrote. It is called Things They Did Not Tell Me, 30 Lessons Learned as a New Pastor. We want you to pick up a copy. It's available on Amazon. But more than a book, it is that is about creating that space where we can have this honest conversation. So can we be honest today? Because ministry is sacred. It's a very sacred work, but ministry also involves humans. And because ministry involves human, it becomes a very heavy burden to bear. Humans trying to do sacred work. And so we're going to start having some honest conversations about various things that pastors experience, various things that we go through as ministers. And the truth is, someone has to start the conversation. Someone has to tell the truth. And so let's go ahead and dig into what ministry looks like on the back end. By the way, if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, go ahead and click that subscribe, hit the bell so that you can get the notification when we upload these videos. And please also share with those around you, friends and families, those you know who are pursuing ministries or other pastors who are in ministry right now, as well as anybody who you know who has the intention to join the ministry, or somebody who for whatever reason have left the ministry. Just like and share with them so that they can have this material as well. Now, a little bit about me. I was born in Jamaica. I was born in the island, on the island of Jamaica. I was raised as an Adventist. I think maybe 3 or 4 generations. I've been in the church my whole life. Everything that I know from church, right? Was raised by a wonderful mom, 4 of us. I'm the only pastor in the lot. Matter of fact, I'm the only one of 4 who made it to university. It's just a beautiful story of God's keeping care and his promise to provide that which is necessary for his people. I went to university with the US equivalent, I believe, of about $35. And that $35 was to pay rent, it was to pay tuition, and it was to do just about everything. And that's how the journey got started. But God has been so faithful that while I was on my way, it was a 3-hour drive from where I lived to the university. While I was on my way, my pastor at the time, he called me and he said, "Hey, I found you somewhere to stay, and I have paid your first month rent." Right? I've also found you a job on the campus so you could go to work. And then as you work, you accumulate some funds and you go ahead and study. God has been faithful. We graduated without any debt owing to the college, and we're able to start life. Graduated during COVID. Very interesting time to graduate, by the way. If any of you graduated during COVID, then you know what I'm talking about. A very, very interesting time. Bounce here and there where ministry is concerned. You know, had my own experiences with different conferences. The brethren promised you employment, and then they flip the script here and there, here and there. And those stories are for another time. But the essence is, after a while, I landed in the United States, and then went back to school, and God called me into the field that I'm now working. And it's been a blessing to serve God's people, uh, from humble beginnings, to see how He has been faithful through all the seasons of transition. That's one of the beautiful things about ministry, right? So it's always been a blessing over these few years to look back and to share the experience of how God has been faithful along the journey of this thing called ministry. No, I did not burn out when I started ministry. Still haven't burned out, but I'm not. I've had my moments where I'm not too far from burning out. And those moments where I have had overloads, and I've had the moments in ministry where it almost feels like the weight of ministry becomes too hard to bear, is not because I rejected, neglected something, or because I hated ministry. It happened simply because there is that love for what God has called you to do. And so, most pastors, we will tell you, we love people, we love preaching, we love showing up, we love serving. But slowly, once you keep loving people, and once you keep preaching, and you keep showing up, and you keep serving, something starts to break inside of you. And that's what happened to me. After a while, something started to change. I was overworked, very under supported. I was in a place where I was almost locked away from everybody. Let me give you a little bit more context here. So when I started, I was pastor in four churches on the island. That's just typical. Matter of fact, if you're in Jamaica, some people would say that it's a good situation compared to the guys who have seven and eight. But this is not a theological debate, but I just don't know anyone who can efficiently pastor multiple churches. That's not a biblical design. You can manage them, but you can't pastor them. Okay, so I was overworked, but one of the things that was so stark about my reality is I had four churches where I was living. One of my church was 76 miles one way from my house. And so I had one church 76 miles from my house. The other one was 68. The other one was 56. And the other one was 32. Had a lot of driving to do. I was dealing with a context where I'd never been in, pastoring African Americans, and I'm from a different culture. So there's a learning curve. I'm also in a state that I've never been. So it's a learning curve. It's a very, very different experience. And you're a new pastor, you want to present yourself as being faithful to the task. And so you work. Problem is, I didn't have the local support as much as would have been necessary for the success. I was under supported. And spiritually, like with many pastors, I felt responsible for everyone. Emotionally, I felt responsible for everybody as well. But I kept telling myself this, and I think this is a lie, first of all. I kept telling myself, just push a little bit harder, and the day tomorrow is going to be a little bit easier than today. That's a lie, first of all. Just keep pushing a little bit harder is your first recipe for disaster, because that's you overlooking and telling yourself that what you're experiencing or how you're navigating it is true, but it really isn't. Pushing a little bit harder is your body telling you, hey, it's time for you to push less harder, slow down. So I kept telling myself that, and just so I could be there for people, just so I could answer one more phone call, just so I could do one more visit, so I could preach one more sermon, or just so I could show up one more time for one more person. But here's what nobody really tells you about. That in no form of training this pops up, and that is ministry doesn't always collapse you dramatically. The collapse of ministry rather doesn't happen dramatically. It happens slowly and systematically and incrementally. You stop sleeping well. You stop feeling joy to do the things that you usually once found joy doing. You start snapping at people that you love. You feel guilty for resting and you feel ashamed for asking for help. And eventually your soul just starts shutting down. Now, I did not stop doing ministry, even though I was very tired. I didn't stop, even though my soul was shutting down. And all of that was premised on this. I believe God called me, and so I was going to work until the day I die. And there was also the expectation from other colleagues, the expectation based on the perceptions, the lingering perceptions of ministry, that you just keep on going. And so my soul was tired, and I was starting to shut down. Now, here is a fun fact. I'm not alone, or my story is not even unique, because there's research that shows this reality, that there is a bigger story involved in ministry. Now, Barna Research Group, if you don't know Barna is one of the leading research groups on churches. They focus on research regarding different elements of church, and one of the things that Barna Research put forward is that 38% of all pastors in the United States say that they've seriously considered quitting full time ministry in just the past year alone. Think about that. 38% of all pastors said, "Listen, man, I was just gonna quit in the last year alone." This is not compounded by how many years of pastors wanting to quit, but this is just within the last year alone, and that should tell us something. Now, that means that nearly two out of every five pastor quietly have pondered whether or not they should keep going, or whether or not they should quit. How many pastors do you know? I think you know at least two pastors. You might even know at least five. If you know at least five, two of the five, they have considered just throwing in the towel and calling it quit. Now, the research doesn't stop there, because it gets a little bit deeper. Barna also reports that, watch this, 35% of pastors are considered, only 35% of the pastors that we know are considered to be healthy. And when we talk about health, we're talking about holistic health: spiritual, physical, emotional, vocational, and financial. 65% of all pastors fall into an average bracket, or in the unhealthy category. So statistically, what this means is that most pastors are not thriving. How many pastors do you know? Most of them are not thriving. We are surviving. The major difference. We're getting by, but we are not thriving. It's a very interesting, stark reality, if you will, sobering, of what really is going on with these spiritual leaders. Now, young pastors, when we say young, we're talking under 45. Young pastors are carrying even a heavier burden, because the research continues to say that pastors under 45, 46% say that they are considering leaving the ministry. That is almost half. That's almost one in two who says, "Listen, I'm considering just walking away from ministry," compared to 34% of pastors who are over 45 who says, "Listen, I'm not going anywhere." And much argument can be made as to why some of our pastors over 45 have said, "Listen, we're not going anywhere." One of those arguments is, they've been in the work for a very long time. They've figured out how to navigate the challenges of ministry. Number two, you've been in the work for a while. Retirement is about 15 years or 18 years ahead of you. And so, you're vested and you decide, hey, I'm not leaving. I'm just going to finish this thing. And then some don't leave because where are you going to go? This is all you've been doing your whole life, and you've got family that depends on this security, so to speak, this longevity of ministry, so that the needs can be met and all that kind of stuff. So there are various arguments, and then some pastors over 45, they figured out their calling, their niche within ministry. They're enjoying what they're doing. They've gotten the breakthrough. But the stark reality of this research says that 46% of pastors under 45, they've considered just quitting. I want you to think about that within context of the future of the church, and within context of the present generation, or the generational change that's happening, because it lets you know that half of the next generation of leaders are already emotionally and spiritually and physically and financially on their way to burning out. They're searching for the exit. Now, the president of Barna explains that burnout was already rising before the COVID-19 pandemic. But after the pandemic, congregational conflicts and financial strains, pastors are now really facing what he calls a growing crisis in church leadership. Yeah, a growing crisis in church leadership. Now, let's put it this way. This in no way suggests that pastors are weak. Let's clear that up. That's not what this suggests. There's a deeper, you might have some weak pastors in there here or there, but I'm not in a position to call anybody weak. And based on my experiences with pastors, most pastors I've come across who have their own situations that they're dealing with, they're not weak. They're really dealing with a system that is overwhelming. This is not about leaders carrying spiritual responsibilities just for themselves or for their families. We're talking about spiritual leaders who are carrying spiritual responsibilities for hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, while they are almost emotionally unavailable. Their emotional infrastructure has already been broken down or is in the process of tearing down. So there is something that the research is leading us to think about, and that is the system that pastors function within. What can we say about that system when we look at the pros and cons? When we do a whole SWOT analysis, what can we learn from that system? So here's an analysis. Let's look at this data and what it really means for pastors. Pastors are not just burning out because the hours are long. By the way, a lot of us, we work long hours. If you ever hear a pastor say, listen, we clock in and we never clock out, it is very true, because there are 2 a.m. phone calls, there are 5 a.m. calls. I remember one time I had to leave my house at 5 in the morning because somebody broke into our church. Ridiculous. Somebody broke into one of our church and stole toilet paper. And so I had to leave my house because I couldn't get any of the other members at 5 in the morning to go there because the door was completely off the hinges, right? You work long hours. The days are sometimes very long. You're doing visits and you're in meetings, or you're handling crisis calls, or you're trying to balance your own personal responsibilities, your familial responsibilities, with that of your professional responsibilities. But pastors are not burning out because of long hours. They're burning out really because of culture. Let's talk about this. Within pastoral ministry, there is a culture of performance. Yeah, I said it. It's true. There's a culture of performance. There's almost an unspoken rule that you must always be strong. You must always be available. You must always be faithful, always be positive. You can never get tired. You can never get angry. It's always like you can never even be confused. It's like we're saying you cannot be human. I remember when I just started out, I had a church, three people in the church. Pray for the past. Three people in the church. And I was so in my first month, I was like, Lord, what have I gotten myself into? Because no, three people, what am I supposed to do with three people? Right. And I remember I was having a conversation with an older pastor, and I guess he was well intentioned. He said to me, I had to do the same thing back in the day. And because I survived, you will survive. And then he culminated the whole thing by saying, Preacher, don't let it die on your watch. Right? I thought about that. I was like, what in the world? That does not make any sense. So there is the idea that we have to, it's almost like collaborative suffering or collaborative hardship, where because you had to go through the hardship, I have to go through the hardship. And never mind the fact that I've got three members, and a lot of things are not working out with the three members, and trying to sustain an organization of three people. Let's just talk about the fact that you can't let that thing die on your watch. And so there is the culture of performance, which says, listen, I don't care how you do it, just do it. And so if you've ever been to a pastoral conference, you'll see where we dress a particular way, we speak a particular way. How you doing, brother? God bless you. It's good to see you. Preacher, how are you, man? Things are going great. How I'm blessed and highly favored. God is good. Right? And we know the jargons. We know exactly how to present ourselves. But when these conferences are over and you sit with yourself and you begin to ponder, but I have the same reality to deal with that I had before. Huh. And then when you come back to another conference, you do the same thing. Or when you get a call, you do the same thing. There is just this idea that the unspoken rule that we have to perform, you have to match up, right? And so people bring you their grief, people bring you their marital issues, they bring you their marital issues, they bring you their addictions, they bring you their crisis. But here is the sign of ministry that makes no sense to the human mind. There is no logic to it. Who holds the pastor's broken marriage together? Who deals with the pastor's addictions? Who deals with the pastor's failings and shortcomings and the pastor's crisis? Who handles all of those? And I know somebody's tempted to say, well, take them to God. But think about this. If you tell your member to take it to God, I probably call your employer and you say, hey, this guy's not a spiritual caregiver at all, right? Or whatever the case is. But think about that. Pastors are preaching hope while privately they're drowning. You know, you're leading prayer meeting and you're leading prayer convention and you're leading prayer circles while silently you're exhausted. You don't even have the strength to pray for yourself. You are counseling others about their own marriage and about their own struggles while you are going back home to a marriage that's worse than theirs, or you're going home to a wife that feels neglected, kids that feels neglected. You're counseling people about how to help them to get their kids back in church, or how to help them to get their kids to live purposeful lives. But your kids have absolutely nothing to do with church. They've been so hurt and battered and bruised and worn out from the church experience, the churchy experience rather, that they want nothing to do with it. And you give and you give and you give and you give and you give. And then check this out. Seldom do you have members or anybody who checks in on the shepherd. Think about that. Because everyone assumes the shepherd is fine. I remember there was one week, man, I had the longest week in ministry. I was so tired. I was worn out. And I went to church. One of my elders, I guess he was well intentioned. That's the only way I could put it. He was well intentioned. He said to me, Pastor, you looked so tired, man. I said, yeah, man, I'm worn out. It's really been a long week. I would have rather to stay home today because just needed some rest. And the good, well-intentioned elder said to me, ah, man, you're young, you're fine, you'll be okay. Like, wow. Wow. That's how you really think of me, and it's a very common story. Ask any pastor, or you look into your own ministry and look at the ratio, the amount of people that you pray for in relation to the amount of people that prays for you, the amount of people that you call to check up on in relation to the amount of people that checks up on you, the amount of families that you show up for in relation to the amount of people that shows up for your family. And that's not to put pressure on the members. But when we talk about the collective experience as a community that we see in the book of Acts, there is a divine spiritual communal responsibility of every single member of the community to ensure that every single member of the community is okay. The short way of saying that is members check on the pastor continues to check on the members. It is a two-way street, right? But ministry trains you in a great way to give and to give and to give and just keep on giving. But rarely do you come across ministry teachings that talks about how you should receive. And so we celebrate sacrifices, but we never really talk about how we protect sustainability, right? We honor servanthood, but very seldom do we talk about boundaries and how to construct healthy boundaries that works for your longevity and your sustainability. And so pastors, we bleed quietly, not because we lack faith, not because we did not pray hard enough, but because the system rewards depletion. The system rewards performance. The system rewards suffering. And I'm not throwing words at the employers. Let's be clear about that, right? But the truth is, when you look at the system as it is, it rewards the guys who give all they have. Sometimes I talk to retired pastors whenever I meet them. I'm always fascinated to hear their journey of ministry. And one of the things that I find very, very interesting, that not barring a single one, and I've spoken to many in my lifetime, every single retired pastor that I come across, and I ask them this one question: if you had to go back and do over your ministry, what's one thing you'd do differently? And they will tell you the same thing. I would spend more time with my family. I would actually go home for dinner. I would actually show up for my kid's birthday party. I would actually show up for graduation. I would actually have invested more time in my wife, right? And they would tell you, son, Jesus died for the church. You don't have to do it. Go home, right? You think about that and you're like, but why is everybody coming to the end of their journey with that kind of, they're looking back and you're wondering, why? And then it all makes sense. There is a system that rewards performance, system that rewards suffering, a system that rewards sacrifice, right? And so the burnout that we see sometimes, you see guys walking away from ministry. There are multiple reasons for guys walking away from ministry. But from a systemic perspective, burnout is not always about personal failure. I reckon that burnout is more a systemic problem than it is a personal failure, right? And so the anonymous voice this week or for this episode said, I sat in my car after church and I cried. I smiled throughout the service. I hugged people. I preached with passion as though it were my last sermon. Then I left and I fell apart. I felt invisible. I felt alone. I love God, but I do not know how much longer I can keep doing this. Think about that, right? And that might be your story. That might be similar to somebody who you know that's experiencing that. That might be their story, right? But think about this. That voice, that anonymous voice, kind of represents a lot of us in different seasons of ministry. It belongs to a lot of pastors than, truthfully, we will ever care to admit. But when you think about it, how many pastors preach a sermon and when they're done, they go home empty? How many pastors give all they have at the church and then they go home to a wife that doesn't want to see them or a family who doesn't know they exist? That's one of the realities of ministry. Burnout. Now, confession that comes from that anonymous voices. I love God, but I just don't know how much I can keep doing this. The problem with that is if it's not addressed, you find yourself in a position where you begin to resent the things and the people that God has called you to serve. And so over time, the love that you once had for preaching, if that's not addressed, it becomes hatred. And now you begin to preach out of necessity. The counselings that you do, the visitations that you do, the crisis calls that you respond to, the meetings that you chair, and the ministry objectives and opportunities and activities that you participate in that you once loved, because there is this resentment that is caused or being caused by the burnout. Over time, you want nothing to do with these things, or you do them out of necessity. And so some pastors begin to slow down. He begins to lose his drive. He or she begins to lose his or her drive, their fire. And you're wondering, but she used to show up. He used to do this, but they don't anymore. Sometimes it's because God is leading them in another direction, and sometimes it's just it's telling a sign that they're on their way to burning out. And the truth is, here is a fact: you can love your calling and still feel weight of that calling. I mean, is that not the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? Where the man came to save the world, went to the Father and said, man, listen, if it's possible, just take this cup, let it pass. Because the weight of the calling can crush you because you're still human. And that's a part that we want to leave this episode with this. Pastors are humans too, right? Both things can be true. Now, you're not unspiritual, you're just human. I want you to think about this for a minute. And this is not a sermon, but I want to remind you of something that's very simple, but very, very profound. When you look at the incarnational ministry of Jesus, when you look at the ministry of Jesus, when he came to earth and clothed his divinity in humanity to give us this example of who the Father is and how we can be reunited with the Father, this Jesus in the flesh withdrew from people. This Jesus slept. This Jesus said no. This Jesus got tired. He did not heal everyone. He did not meet every demand. He did not answer every request, because if Jesus in the flesh needed rest, pastors do too. And if you are watching this and you're a pastor, sis, bruh, get your rest. If Jesus needed it, you need it too. If Jesus needed solitude, you need solitude too. If Jesus had to set boundaries, so should you. Jesus was not a machine, and you are not a machine. You are flesh and blood. And your humanity is not a liability. Your humanity is who you are. And so, in a conversation with my former president, Ben Jones, he said to me, we're in a series, we're working a series together. My wife was pregnant at the time, and we were staying at an Airbnb. It was a 2-week meeting with 4 weeks of pre-work, so it was 6 weeks, and we were staying there for 2 weeks, and my wife was pregnant, and remember, she was about 76 miles from where I was staying. She was at the house by herself. At that time, we had one car, and so I left the car with her. She was at the house, and I was out in the field, staying at this Airbnb, so we could do ministry. And Elder Jones, he said to me one time, and I appreciate him very much for this. He said, Hudson, go home to Neri. I don't think I appreciated anything else that he said as much as he said that. He said, go home to Neri. Because when you leave these churches, the only person that's leaving with you is your wife. Go home to her. Take care of your family. And that stuck with me. And it's really reshaped how I view ministry, because it reminds me that I am human. And so I have to take care of myself. And that's the same thing that I want to share with you as we shut down this episode. Pastors are humans. If you're a pastor, take care of yourself. If you're a pastor, take care of your family. If you're a member or you're somebody who knows a pastor, take care of them. Pray for them, support them, encourage them. Make their load a little bit lighter. Now, if this episode touched something inside of you, I want you to hear this clearly. Pastor, you are not broken. You are not weak. You are responding normally to an abnormal level or amount of pressure. Ministry Untold exists because too many leaders are suffering in silence. This is a space for honesty, for confession, for awareness. If you have your own story, you can submit it anonymously at ministryuntold.com. And before you go, if you want to walk this journey with us, go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes. Click the bell so you get notified. You can also follow Ministry Untold on Facebook and on Instagram, as well as you could follow me directly on Facebook as well as on Instagram. Next time, we'll talk about loneliness in leadership. Being surrounded by people does not mean that you are known. I hope this was honest enough for you, because someone has to tell the truth. Until next time, I'm Wren Hudson. This is Ministry Untold.